I'm Ethan, a 42-year-old architect with a penchant for clean lines and sturdy foundations, both in my work and my life. My wife, Clara, is the kind of woman who lights up a room. Vibrant, witty, with a laugh that could charm a stone. We've been married for 15 years, built a life together in a cozy suburban home just outside Portland. With a garden we both pretend to understand and a golden retriever named Finn who's better at being human than most people I know. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, solid, dependable like the blueprints I draft for a living. Or so I thought. It was a Tuesday in early June, the air heavy with the scent of blooming jasmine, when I first noticed something off. I'd come home early from a site visit, my boots still caked with mud from a half-finished community center project. Clara wasn't expecting me until dinner, and I figured I'd surprise her with takeout from that Thai place she loves. The house was quiet when I walked in, save for Finn's enthusiastic tail thumping against the hardwood. I called out for Clara, but there was no answer. Her car was in the driveway, her purse on the kitchen counter, her phone buzzing softly next to it. I figured she was in the backyard, maybe lost in one of her painting projects. She's an artist, always chasing the perfect shade of twilight on canvas. I wandered through the house, takeout bag in hand, the faint hum of unease starting to creep in. The living room was tidy, her easel folded in the corner. No sign of her usual creative chaos. Upstairs, our bedroom door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, expecting to find her napping or maybe reading one of those historical novels she devours. Instead, I found her shoes, those red heels she only wore for special occasions, tossed carelessly by the bed. Next to them, a man's jacket. Not mine. It was a navy blazer, crisp and expensive, the kind of thing I'd never wear. My stomach twisted, a slow, cold churn, like concrete setting in my gut. I stood there, frozen, the takeout bag crinkling in my grip. The house was too quiet, but then I heard it. A muffled laugh, not Clara's, coming from the guest room down the hall. My heart thudded, each beat a hammer against my ribs. I set the bag down on the dresser, careful not to make a sound, and moved toward the guest room. The door was closed, but the laughter came again, low and intimate, followed by Clara's voice, soft and playful in a way I hadn't heard in years. "You're terrible," she said, her tone teasing, almost conspiratorial. Then another voice, male, deep, unfamiliar, replied, "You love it." I didn't burst in. I didn't shout. I just stood there, my hand on the doorknob, every nerve in my body screaming to turn it, to see what I already knew. But I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I backed away, silent as a ghost, and retreated downstairs. Finn followed, his eyes wide and questioning, as if he sensed the storm brewing in me. I sat on the couch, staring at the wall, the Thai food forgotten on the counter. My mind raced, piecing together fragments I'd ignored for months. Clara's late nights at the gallery, her sudden interest in networking events, the way she'd started locking her phone, claiming it was just a new habit. I trusted her. I'd built my life on that trust like a house on bedrock. Now the ground was shifting. I don't know how long I sat there before I heard footsteps on the stairs. Clara appeared, her hair slightly mussed, her cheeks flushed. She was wearing a loose sweater and jeans, but there was a glow about her, a kind of reckless energy I hadn't seen in ages. Behind her was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, with a smug grin that made my fists clench. I recognized him vaguely, Mark, one of the gallery owners she worked with. Mid-30s, slick, the kind of guy who probably spent more on haircuts than I did on groceries. "Ethan." Clara's voice was too bright, like she was overcompensating. "You're home early." "Yeah," I said, my voice flat, my eyes locked on Mark. Site visit wrapped up quick. Mark extended a hand, his grin unwavering. "Good to see you, man." Clara was just showing me some of her new pieces. Incredible stuff. I didn't take his hand. I just stared at him, then at Clara, whose smile faltered for a split second. "In the guest room?" I asked, my tone neutral but sharp enough to cut. Her eyes widened just a flicker, but I caught it. "Oh no, I was showing him the storage up there. For the canvases. Right?" I said, standing up. Finn whined softly at my feet. Well, don't let me interrupt. I've got some work to do. I walked past them, grabbed my laptop from the kitchen, and headed to my study. I didn't trust myself to say more. Not yet. The door clicked shut behind me, and I sat at my desk, staring at the blank screen. My hands were shaking, not with fear but with a rage I didn't know I was capable of. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the casualness of it, the way they'd laughed, the way she'd lied to my face without missing a beat. I'd spent 15 years building a life with her, and in one afternoon, it felt like she'd torn it down to the studs. I didn't confront her that night. Couldn't. My mind was a storm of questions. How long had this been going on? Was Mark the only one? Did she love him? Did she ever love me? Instead, I played the part of the oblivious husband, eating cold Thai food while she chattered about her day, her voice a little too animated, her eyes avoiding mine. Mark was gone by then, but his presence lingered, like a stain on the air. Over the next few weeks, I became a detective in my own life. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't unsee what I'd seen, couldn't unhear that laugh. I started small, checking her phone when she was in the shower, scrolling through texts that were suspiciously vague. "Meet me at 7, one said, from a contact labeled Gallery. No name, just Gallery. I cross-referenced the number online and found it belonged to Mark Ellison, owner of Ellison Fine Art, a pretentious little gallery downtown where Clara's work was occasionally displayed. There were emails, too, buried in a folder labeled Work Stuff. Nothing explicit, but the tone was too familiar, too warm. "Can't wait to see you tonight," one read. "Wear the red dress." I didn't stop there. I started tracking her movements, not out of obsession, but because I needed to know how deep this went. I installed a GPS app on her phone one night while she slept, claiming I was just updating her apps. I followed her to gallery meetings that turned out to be dinners at upscale restaurants, her laughter floating through the window as she sat across from Mark, their hands brushing over wine glasses. I watched from my car, parked across the street, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Each moment was a knife, twisting deeper, but I couldn't look away. I started digging into Mark, too. He was married, I learned, to a woman named Rachel, a quiet, bookish type who worked as a librarian. They had a kid, a 4-year-old girl. His Instagram was a curated lie. Family vacations, art openings, him and Rachel smiling in matching sweaters. But I found his ex account, less polished, where he posted cryptic quotes about living for the moment and photos of late-night drinks with no context. Clara liked every one of them. The more I learned, the more my anger grew. Not just at Clara, but at myself. How had I missed this? I'd been so focused on my work, on keeping our life stable, that I hadn't noticed her slipping away. We'd stopped talking, really talking, years ago. Our conversations had become logistics, bills, groceries, Finn's vet appointments. I'd thought that was just marriage, the natural ebb of passion. But now I saw it for what it was, neglect. Not just hers, but mine. Still, her betrayal wasn't just a lapse. It was a choice, repeated, deliberate. She'd invited Mark into our home, our life, while I was out building someone else's future. The thought of them in the guest room, on the bed where we'd once planned our future, made my vision blur with rage. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed a plan, something that would hit as hard as her betrayal had hit me. I started laying the groundwork. I opened a separate bank account, siphoning small amounts from our joint savings. Nothing she'd notice, but enough to give me options. I contacted a lawyer, a guy from my college days who specialized in messy divorces. He told me to document everything, texts, emails, receipts. "Build a case," he said. "If you want to come out on top, you need proof." So I did. I saved screenshots, logged her late nights, even took photos of Mark's car parked outside our house on nights she claimed to be working late. But proof wasn't enough. I didn't just want to win. I wanted her to feel what I felt. I wanted Mark to feel it, too. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about yelling or throwing punches. It was about precision, about dismantling their world the way they'd dismantled mine. I started thinking bigger, beyond divorce papers and alimony. I wanted something that would linger, something they couldn't shrug off over a glass of wine. One night, as Clara slept, I sat in my study, fin curled up at my feet, and started sketching. Not a building, but a plan. I'd always been good at seeing the whole picture, how pieces fit together, how to make something stand or fall. This time, I was designing something else. A reckoning. I didn't know exactly what form it would take, but I knew it would be cruel, calculated, and unforgettable. Clara and Mark thought they'd played me for a fool. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The weeks that followed my discovery of Clara's betrayal were a study in restraint. Every day, I woke up next to her, her face soft and untroubled in sleep, and felt the weight of my anger like a stone in my chest. I'd smile over coffee, ask about her day, laugh at her stories about the gallery, all while my mind churned with plans. I wasn't just Ethan the architect anymore, sketching community centers and eco-friendly homes. I was Ethan the strategist, building something far more intricate. A trap, a masterpiece of consequences. Clara and Mark had no idea what was coming, and that ignorance was my first weapon. I started by deepening my reconnaissance. Knowledge I'd learned was power, and I needed every scrap I could get. Clara's phone was a gold mine, but I had to be careful. She was starting to notice my late nights in the study, my sudden interest in her schedule. "You're working too hard," she'd say, her tone laced with a concern that felt hollow now. I'd nod, mutter something about deadlines, and wait until she was distracted to slip her phone from her purse. The texts between her and Mark were careful, coded in the language of work and meetings, but I found patterns. Thursdays were their night. Always a gallery event that ended with her coming home after midnight, her lipstick slightly smudged, her eyes bright with secrets. I installed a tracking app on her car, too, syncing it to my laptop. It was a small device, tucked under the dashboard during one of her errands. The app showed her routes. The gallery? Sure, but also a boutique hotel downtown, a wine bar in the Pearl District, and once, a secluded park on the edge of town. Each ping on the map was a fresh cut, but I forced myself to stay clinical. I saved screenshots, logged dates and times, even cross-referenced her locations with Mark's ex-posts, where he'd share cryptic photos of city lights or a glass of bourbon with captions like, "Chasing the Night." Clara's likes were a digital fingerprint, betraying her presence. But I needed more than digital evidence. I needed to understand Mark, to know his weaknesses. I started tailing him discreetly on nights when Clara was home. I'd tell her I was meeting a client, then drive to his gallery or his house, a sleek modern place in the hills with floor-to-ceiling windows. I watched him through binoculars from a wooded lot across the street, noting his habits. He left work late, always alone, his phone pressed to his ear as he climbed into his black Audi. His wife, Rachel, was rarely home. Her librarian job kept her at odd hours, and their daughter was often with a nanny. Mark's life was a facade of success, but I could see the cracks. The way he lingered in his car, scrolling through his phone, the tension in his shoulders when Rachel was around. He was a man who thought he was untouchable, and that arrogance was my leverage. I started digging into his world. His gallery, Ellison Fine Art, was a boutique operation, but it had a reputation. I found reviews online, glowing but vague, and a few ex-posts from disgruntled artists claiming Mark played favorites, promising exposure but delivering little. One post, from an anonymous account, hinted at financial trouble, late payments to artists, a bounce check to a caterer. I filed it away, sensing an opportunity. I also learned Rachel was unaware of his side ventures. She posted about their daughter, their quiet life, with a kind of earnest sweetness that made my stomach turn. She didn't deserve this, but she was collateral damage in my plan. My lawyer, Tom, was a godsend. We met over beers at a dive bar, where he laid out my options. Divorce was straightforward. Oregon's no-fault laws meant I'd likely split our assets, but with proof of infidelity, I could push for more favorable terms. "You've got enough for a solid case," he said, flipping through my folder of screenshots and GPS logs. "But if you want to play dirty, we can make it hurt." I told him I didn't just want a divorce. I wanted Clara and Mark to feel the weight of their choices, to lose something they couldn't replace. Tom raised an eyebrow but didn't push. Just be careful, he said. Revenge is a tightrope. I spent nights in my study, Finn curled up by the heater, sketching my plan like I would a building. Every structure needs a foundation, and mine was exposure, not just of the affair but of everything they valued. Clara's art career was her lifeblood, her identity. Mark's gallery was his kingdom, his ego. I take both, but not with a wrecking ball. This would be surgical, a collapse from within. My first move was subtle. I created an anonymous X account, PDX Artwatch, and started posting. Nothing overt, just questions about Ellison Fine Arts practices. Reposting that anonymous complaint about late payments, tagging local artists and art blogs. I posed as a concerned observer, asking why certain artists, like Clara, got prime spots while others were ignored. The posts gained traction, slowly at first, then faster as artists chimed in with their own grievances. I watched Mark's X account for a reaction. He stayed silent, but his posts became less frequent, his captions terser. I'd planted a seed, and it was sprouting. Next, I targeted Clara's reputation. She was known for her landscapes, vivid and emotional, but her recent work had been lackluster, rushed. I'd overheard her tell Mark she was struggling with inspiration, leaning on him for motivation. I used my anonymous account to post a critique, veiled as constructive feedback, pointing out the uninspired shift in her style. I tagged her gallery and a few art critics, knowing they'd see it. The post got likes, retweets, and comments, some sympathetic, others cutting. Clara didn't mention it, but I saw the tension in her jaw at breakfast, the way she scrolled her phone with a frown. Good. Let her feel the pressure. But the real plan was bigger. I needed something that would hit them both where it hurt most. Their public image, their pride. I started researching Mark's finances, using public records and a few discreet inquiries through a PI friend, Sarah, who owed me a favor. She dug up dirt. Mark had taken out a second mortgage on his house to keep the gallery afloat, and he was behind on payments to several artists. The gallery was a house of cards, propped up by his charm and Clara's paintings, which drew crowds. If I could destabilize it, I could bring him down. I also looked into Rachel. I didn't want to hurt her, but I needed her to know. Not yet, though. Timing was everything. I found her email through the library's website and drafted a message, anonymous, with just enough detail to plant doubt. Ask Mark about his late nights at the gallery. You deserve the truth. I saved it, waiting for the right moment. At home, I kept up the facade. Clara was oblivious, or so she thought. She'd kiss me goodnight, her lips cool and perfunctory, then slip out for events, while I pretended to work. I'd watch the GPS app, see her car parked at the hotel, and feel the rage simmer. But I channeled it, letting it fuel my plan. I started dropping hints, subtle enough to unsettle her. Heard the gallery struggling, I'd say over dinner, watching her pause mid-bite. Hope Mark's treating you right. Her eyes would flicker, but she'd laugh it off, change the subject. I was getting under her skin. One night, I pushed harder. We were in the kitchen, Finn begging for scraps, when I mentioned a rumor I'd heard about Mark hitting on artists. Sounds like a sleaze, I said, casual, slicing carrots. Clara's knife stopped, just for a second, before she laughed too loudly. He's just friendly, she said. You know how the art world is. I nodded, but inside, I was grinning. She was rattled. My plan was taking shape, but it needed a catalyst, something to bring it all crashing down. I decided on a public event. A gallery opening Clara was headlining, set for a Friday in July. It was perfect. Mark would be there, strutting like a peacock. Clara would be the star, her paintings the centerpiece. I'd use the night to expose them, not with a scene, but with something they couldn't ignore. I started preparing. I contacted Sarah again, asking her to pose as a potential buyer at the opening. She'd ask pointed questions about the gallery's finances, loud enough for others to hear. I also reached out to a local art blogger, feeding them anonymous tips about Mark's shady practices. I hacked together a burner email and sent Rachel the message I'd drafted, timing it to arrive the day before the opening. I wanted her there, her presence a silent pressure on Mark. But the centerpiece was something else. I'd found an old painting of Clara's, one she'd abandoned years ago. A raw, chaotic piece about betrayal, all jagged lines and stormy colors. She'd hated it, called it too personal, but I saw its potential. I had it framed, anonymously, and arranged for it to be delivered to the gallery the night of the opening with a note. For Clara, a reminder of truth. It would hang among her polished landscapes, a stark contrast, its title, Deceptions, a quiet accusation. As the opening approached, I felt a strange calm. Clara was distracted, snapping at small things, her confidence fraying. Mark's ex-posts were defensive, railing against haters in the art scene. My anonymous account was gaining followers, stirring the pot. The stage was set, and I was ready to pull the first lever. Clara and Mark thought they were untouchable, but I was about to show them how fragile their world was. The night of the gallery opening arrived like a storm cloud, heavy with promise and menace. I stood in our bedroom, adjusting my tie in the mirror, while Clara fussed with her earrings across the room. She was radiant in a deep emerald dress, her hair swept up, her movements precise but nervous. I'd seen her like this before big shows, but tonight there was an edge to her. A tightness in her smile, a flicker in her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. She had no idea what was coming, and that knowledge sat in my chest like a coiled spring, ready to snap. "You sure you want to come?" she asked, her voice light but probing. "These things can be boring for you." I smiled, the kind of smile I'd perfected over weeks of playing the oblivious husband. "Wouldn't miss it. Your big night, right?" She nodded, but her eyes didn't meet mine. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, wondering if I suspected anything. I let her wonder. We drove to Ellison Fine Art in silence. Finn's absence in the back seat, a quiet reminder of the life we'd built together, now teetering on the edge of ruin. The gallery was downtown, a sleek space with white walls and polished concrete floors, lit up like a beacon against the July dusk. Cars lined the street, and a small crowd milled outside. Artists, critics, collectors, all buzzing with anticipation. Clara's paintings were the draw, her name bold on the marquee. Clara Harper, Horizons Unbound. I felt a pang, not of love but of loss, for the woman I'd thought she was. Inside, the air was thick with perfume and pretension. Mark was in his element, shaking hands, his navy suit tailored to perfection, his grin as polished as the floors. He spotted us and sauntered over, his hand lingering too long on Clara's arm as he greeted her. "You're a vision," he said, then turned to me, his smile a fraction cooler. "Ethan, glad you made it. Grab a drink. Enjoy the show." "I plan to," I said, my tone neutral but my eyes locked on his. He didn't flinch, but I saw the briefest tightening of his jaw. Good. Let him feel me watching. The gallery was packed, Clara's paintings glowing under strategic lighting, vast landscapes of forests and oceans, all color and emotion. They were beautiful, I'd give her that, but they felt hollow now, like a performance. I mingled, glass of wine in hand, playing the proud husband while my mind tracked every piece of my plan. Sarah, my PI friend, was already there, posing as a wealthy collector in a sharp blazer, chatting up a critic near the bar. She caught my eye, gave a subtle nod. The art blogger I tipped off, a wiry guy named Leo, was snapping photos, his ex-posts already stirring buzz about the show, and, I hoped, my anonymous rumors about Mark's shady dealings. Then I saw it, the painting I'd sent. It hung in a corner, slightly apart from Clara's curated collection, its raw chaos drawing curious glances. Deceptions, the title card read, and the note I'd included was pinned beside it, cryptic but pointed. For Clara, a reminder of truth. She hadn't noticed it yet, but others had, whispering about its intensity, its deviation from her usual style. I watched her work the room, oblivious, while Mark schmoozed a group of investors. The air felt charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. Rachel arrived just as the speeches began. I spotted her near the entrance, her librarian's cardigan out of place among the glitterati, her 4-year-old daughter clinging to her hand. She looked tired, uncertain, her eyes scanning the room for Mark. I knew my anonymous email had reached her. She'd replied to it, a curt, "Who is this?" that I hadn't answered. Her presence was exactly what I'd planned. A quiet pressure, a crack in Mark's facade. She didn't approach him, just stood there, watching, her face a mask of restrained hurt. Mark took the stage, his voice smooth as he introduced Clara. A visionary, he called her, his eyes lingering on her in a way that made my grip tighten on my glass. Clara followed, her speech polished but nervous, her hands fluttering as she thanked the crowd, the gallery, Mark. She didn't mention me. I stood at the back, unnoticed, my heart a cold engine of purpose. Then Sarah made her move. She raised her hand during the Q&A, her voice carrying across the room. "Mr. Ellison, there's been talk about financial issues here. Late payments to artists, questions about transparency. Can you address that?" The room stilled, heads turning. Mark's smile froze, but he recovered quickly, laughing it off. "Just the usual art world gossip. We're thriving, as you can see." But the seed was planted. I saw Leo typing furiously on his phone, no doubt live tweeting the exchange. A few artists exchanged glances, their murmurs a low hum. Clara's eyes darted to Mark, then away. She'd felt the shift, the sudden scrutiny. I sipped my wine, letting the moment simmer. Then Rachel moved. She approached Mark as he stepped off the stage, her voice low but sharp enough to carry. "We need to talk. Now." Their daughter tugged at her hand, confused, as Mark's face paled. He tried to steer Rachel toward a corner, but she pulled away, her voice rising. "Don't lie to me, Mark. I know about the late nights." The crowd pretended not to notice, but the tension was palpable. Clara froze, her face a mask of panic, and I knew it was time for the next blow. I nodded to Sarah, who slipped over to Leo and whispered something. Moments later, his ex-post went up, "Big night at Ellison Fine Art," but whispers of scandal stealing the show. What's behind deceptions? #PDXArtWatch. He'd seen the painting, read the note, and connected the dots, or thought he had. The post spread like wildfire, retweeted by artists and critics in the room. Clara finally saw the painting. She stopped mid-conversation, her glass trembling in her hand as she read the title card. I watched her face collapse, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. She knew that painting, knew its history, knew it wasn't supposed to be here. Her eyes scanned the crowd, landing on me for a fleeting second. I held her gaze, my expression blank, and she looked away, her breath hitching. The night unraveled from there. Rachel and Mark's argument escalated, drawing eyes. She didn't mention Clara by name, but her accusations, late nights, secret calls, were damning enough. Mark tried to calm her, his charm crumbling, but Rachel was done. She left with their daughter, her parting words a quiet, cutting, "I'm done." The crowd buzzed, phones out, the art world's gossip machine in overdrive. Clara tried to salvage the night, but the damage was done. Critics lingered by Deceptions, speculating about its raw honesty, while Leo's posts fueled online chatter about Mark's mismanagement and Clara's mysterious personal life. My anonymous X account added fuel, reposting Leo's tweets with comments like, "Is Ellison Fine Art hiding more than art?" The gallery's reputation was cracking, and Clara's with it. I left early, telling Clara I had a headache. She barely noticed, too busy fielding questions about the painting. At home, I sat in my study, Finn at my feet, checking X. The hashtag PDXArtWatch was trending locally, with artists piling on about Mark's unpaid invoices, Clara's favoritism, and the mysterious deceptions. By morning, the gallery's website had crashed from traffic, and a local news outlet had picked up the story, hinting at financial irregularities. Clara came home after 2 a.m., her face drawn, her dress crumpled. "Rough night?" I asked, my voice mild. She nodded, avoiding my eyes, and went straight to bed. I didn't sleep. I sat up, planning the final phase. The next week was chaos for them. Mark's gallery faced a flood of demands from artists for back payments, and a small protest formed outside, organized by a painter I tipped off anonymously. Clara's show was overshadowed by the scandal, her paintings unsold as collectors backed away. Rachel filed for divorce, her lawyer citing irreconcilable differences, in a public statement that didn't name Clara but didn't need to. The art world was small and whispers were loud. I filed for divorce the same day. I didn't confront Clara. I didn't need to. I left the papers on the kitchen counter, along with a USB drive containing every text, email, and GPS log I'd collected. The note was simple: "You built this." She found them while I was at work, and her calls flooded my phone, tearful voicemails begging to talk. I didn't answer. I said everything I needed to. Mark's gallery closed a month later, buried under lawsuits and bad press. Clara's career stalled, her name tied to the scandal, her paintings labeled tainted by critics. She moved out, renting a small apartment downtown, her vibrancy dimmed. I kept the house, Finn, and my dignity. The revenge wasn't sweet. It was cold, precise, like a perfectly executed blueprint. I'd torn down their world, piece by piece, and rebuilt my own on the ruins.